Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we've got another little show to have a look around. This time it's at Sumners Ponds in West Sussex. Rather than the usual shows we get, with the lines of the trade stands opposite the flight line and not much else, this show is far more open. Each discipline has its own field a short distance from each other. There wasn't all that much trade, some ladies with some rather fancy looking cakes, a couple of people selling some old tat, and a couple of modelling traders with your batteries, boat fittings and general odds and sods. But I don't think the trade was really the point here. Most of the tents were model clubs showing their models, mostly boats, but there was a few crawlers and trucks here and there too. One of the traders had one of the new Traxxas TRX4s, the first one I've come across. If that thing was a kit, I'd definitely have had it. As an RTR, I think half the value's missing. Traxxas used to do kits a long time ago. I built up an electric Stampede, which was rather good. Anyway, noisy trucks. They were mostly running lossy 5s. They're 4-wheel drive, powered with a 2-stroke petrol engine. I'm fairly certain some of them were running tune pipes, and in some cases I reckon a non-stock engine. There was quite a range in the exhaust notes. These trucks are another bit of the hobby I'd really love to get into. They've got some real heft to them, so they move a lot more like the full-size trucks than the 1/8s and 1/10s. But unless you live right out in the sticks, the noise can be a problem. Not to mention the potential damage if you hit something or someone. They really need a club track to get the best from them. There is electric, of course, huge lipos and motors. They're really quite fast, but I do like my little engines. Now for some quadcopters, or drones if you like. These were the racing ones to be specific, all with FPV goggles. I've no doubt when you get the goggles on they're great fun, but for the spectating they're really not so great. It wouldn't be simple with the power and lighting, but it would be nice to see an onboard view on a nice large TV screen. Well, since these little quads are a little bit difficult to film, I think we're going to move on up the hill to the fixed wings. It was pretty well set up, run by the Horsham Club if I remember correctly. The only annoyance was all the little flags along the edge of the spectator area. They always managed to line up with something interesting. Anyway, here we have some foamy fighters, electric of course. They might well have been the larger E-Flight foamies, always a good instant scale model, all of them fly pretty well, and they come with a power system that does the job. I've got one of the older Spitfire models, and it still flies just fine. No mods, no fixes, it just works. Great when you don't want to deal with all the complex assembly at the field, or build at all for that matter. Next at the flight line we've got something we don't see all that often, a control line model. Oh, while he's getting ready, another minor thing, that music. The guy on the laptop really likes his film soundtracks. Pirates of the Caribbean came up quite a few times, and it's not so much the music itself, it adds a certain something, but it was really, really loud. Anyway, the control line. The model I think was a 56-inch span. It was 50 something and in the upper half. It's got an engine on the front, no throttle, it's pure tuning. The general trick with control line, outside of team racing, is to set up the engine so it's running rich in level flight to keep the revs down. When you pull some G, the engine leans out and the revs pick up and it picks up power. It's probably down to control line models that I like small engines so much. I had a Cox P39 Easy Flyer with an 049 on the front when I was 10 or so. I never got to fly it, but I did run the engine quite a bit, much to the annoyance of my neighbours no doubt. That little engine doesn't have any silencer. In the next field were some huge kites. Not really my thing, they're all tethered to the ground and just kinda hang up there. All the different shapes are rather neat though. It must take quite a lot of skill to design them so they stay up. Both the kites and the planes and helis were up a little bit of a hill from the trucks. And where we're going next, the boats. So, not to sound lazy, I'm really not, but I've got a knee that likes to pop every so often, so rather than risk a sore left leg for the drive home, I hung around the boats. There was quite a few different types. I feel like the boats were the main bit of the show really. More than anything else, lots of clubs present, most of them from the south coast. There were 2 little jet boats which looked fun. I think these are the models that were super popular a couple of years ago. Just about every model shop had them as an easy entry-level race class. Great stuff. Not surprisingly, I'd love to get into boats too, but there is of course nowhere to run them close to where I live. There's a club 15 or so miles away with access to a large bit of private water, but as I don't get to my flying club as often as I'd like, the last time was October last year, and after club fees and whatnot, it's really not going to be worth it. I do have a Kyosho Atlantio 600 I often think about modernising with lipos and brushless, but without anywhere to float it, there's really not much point. It's nice to look at though, and one day it will get a trailer to go behind the Tamiya Grand Hauler. One of the boat clubs present was a bit odd, but that's okay, we're British. They do some very rough battle reenactments using boats, tanks and some pyrotechnics. I recorded quite a bit of these guys, and some other stuff too, so I'll do what I did last week and upload an unlisted extended rough cut for anyone who wants to see more. This time though, it shouldn't get a copyright claim, so it should be available worldwide. Anyway, we start with a convoy in the mid-Atlantic going about its business. Don't mind the submarine, we can't actually see him yet. We've got the usual sort of convoy ships and the odd duck passing by. When suddenly, out of nowhere, a German U-boat pops up and gets a hit on one of the ships. Shortly after, it gets another hit. Cue lots of smoke. There were some pops and bangs, but of course, they almost all happened when I paused the recording. The U-boat then, happy with his kills, goes under the water to hide from the torpedo boat, which after lots of sonar pinging, finds the U-boat and drops 2 depth charges. And of course I started recording just after the first one, but the second was quite successful. With the U-boat out of the picture, the torpedo boat went a bit nuts. Powered with a LiPo and twin-speed 600 motors, it does go rather well. Now for some reason that I didn't quite understand, that little battle enables us, the Allies, to land 2 craft with tanks on board to invade the little town. The first landed okay, the second though was smoking heavily. Not sure what the story was supposed to be, or if they just had an extra smoke bomb, which was a bit odd. The trick here, according to the guy on the PA, is to drive the tanks off quickly without hesitation, or the tracks on the tanks have a tendency to push the boat out from under them, resulting in a very wet tank. Now outside the town, the Allied tanks, who seem to have been at it like rabbits, begin their attack. The Germans, however, are of course ready. The little Sherman goes across the bridge, but it did not choose wisely. I think we should see that again, this time in slow motion, because explosions and all that. There was of course another bridge, so they just went over that one instead. On the other side we've got a couple of Tiger 1s defending the town and the mortars by the water. But since the Allied tanks have been really going at it, they outnumber the Tigers several to 1, which is historically fairly accurate. They keep fighting over the bridge and push the Tigers out and take the town. As I said above, there's a lot more footage, so that'll end up in a video linked in the description. Now the Allies have control of the mortars, they can take aim at the radar installation across the water and blow it up. Please note, this shot started out perfectly level, then as I waited for the explosion, it very slowly rotated. I blame the sun glare on the camera screen, because I couldn't really see what I was filming. Quite a good little display, if a little chaotic, but explosions are always fun. Next up we've got a few G-scale trains. These are the usual size for garden railway layouts. Quite neat, but the large scale trains always look a little bit toyish. But this is an RC channel, so we'll move on to the last little section. Some more boats. There was a lot of scale boats and ships around. To really appreciate them you need to visit the show and have a poke around the club stands. This was a good example though. It would probably pass as a static scale model quite easily, but it's a fully functional RC. Lovely. And I'd bet extremely relaxing to float around. A nice folding chair, some sandwiches, maybe some tea. Lovely. Just around the corner, the pilot of that boat lost his hat in the water. Attempts were made to rescue it by a tug, but that only caused the hat to sink even more. Luckily though, someone who looks like he owns a lot of model boats and other miscellaneous nautical stuff was passing by in a dinghy. The young'un on the front bow fished it out and they handed it over to the owner. The last thing I recorded were some sailboats, or dinghies, all RC, no electric propulsion at all wind power. They had some mini buoys floating around to make up a course, and were racing. But just like full-size racing with the tacking into wind, it was really hard to see who was in front. But when they did get together, it was rather exciting to see who could get round without being knocked off course. Which just leaves some ducks going by, and another boat who ended up in the middle of the sail race, probably wishing he hadn't ventured so far in. And that's it. I could hear a lot more flying going on, and the trucks were constantly running. There was a bashing area with some ramps, and the BRCA had a nice little stand with some electric trucks. There's plenty to keep anyone with a vague interest in modelling occupied. This was only the show's 5th year, and I think they're doing a great job. If the weather holds, I'm sorely tempted to go again tomorrow. The tickets are really cheap too. Anyway, no model show next week. I'd love to go up to Weston Park, but I don't think I'm going to make it. Oh well, we can't go to them all. So, thanks for watching, like if you liked, subscribe if you want more. Bye guys!